Fair use. Federal law allows citizens to reproduce, distribute, or exhibit portions of copyrighted motion pictures, videotapes, or video discs under certain circumstances without authorization of the copyright holder. This is called fair use and is allowed for purposes of criticism, news reporting, teaching, and parody, which doesn't infringe of copyright under 17 U.S.C. 107.
O Yahweh, Kuma, Yahweh, Wayafuto O Yazeasa, Wayanusa Misanecha Bitunecha. Arise of you, O Yahweh. Let your enemies be scattered, and let those that hate thee flee from before thee. Give him thanks by saying Hallelujah.
All right, Shalom fam, and welcome to Into All Truth. May the Ruach HaKodesh lead you into all truth and show you things to come, and may the seed of the word be planted in your heart to bring forth the fruit of righteousness. Praise Yah. Hallelujah. All right, so today we are talking about the Medo-Persians, Cyrus, my servant. And I'm going to tie this into the four beasts and Prester John because I want to continue on a bit with the Prester John series. We know that currently, as of this date, 1/3 of the buildings in Tel Aviv have been destroyed by the Iranians. And there are rumors that one of their chief military leaders, David, I can't remember his last name, starts with a B, has been taken out by the Iranians. And they are saying that if America enters the war, that they will pursue America as well. And of course, the scripture prophesies that the Iranians, that the Medo-Persians will remember themselves. So I want to go into, some of the genealogies of the people who made up the mixed multitude and put themselves forwards as the Ethiopians and took over the kingdom of Israel. And as I've said, have done this prophetically over the ages. And one of those is the Medo-Persians. So, but before we do any of that, we really have to go into Japheth's blessing, because I want to cover, the seed of Ethiopia just a little bit more, but then I want to go into the seed of Japheth, the good seed and the bad seed. And the good seed of Japheth is the Medo-Persians, and sometimes Yavan, and sometimes not the Medo-Persians. And so we're going to look at those genealogies. We're going to look at the fact that they actually did rule as one of the Ethiopian kings over the ages. And we're going to see how they got to where they are today. They actually were part of Israel going into captivity, and they've been under judgment by Yahuwah right up until this moment, when, according to the prophecy, they would remember themselves, and they will actually be coming against Babylon as Yahuwah's vengeance, as they are described as Cyrus, my servant. The Medo-Persians are a Christ-like figure, which is why the Americans and the Ashkenazim, who have been pretending to be Israel, have been so against them for hundreds of years, but really acutely since the 70s. And so we're going to look at the judgments that Yahuwah meted out against them, because they were part of Israel going into captivity, but also the blessings on them, and how Cyrus actually was the servant of Yahuwah in the past for the building of the second temple, And once again, I've done a lot of videos on this, how they are prophesied to return Israel, who are the final temple. And so again, once again, this is the return of the bride by Yahuwah's servant, his right hand, Cyrus. Now, Israel is the firstborn son, the right hand of Yah. But Cyrus, the Medo-Persians are also part of the grafted in groups who are the good seed who ultimately are on Israel's side. And so I'm showing you all these beautiful images of the Medo-Persians because I want you to know that one of the things that set them apart from all of the other sons of Japheth was that they mixed in with the Shemitic women and with the descendants of Arphaxad, and they mixed in a number of times with Israel as well. And so through Esther. And so there's a specific blessing that they have and promises that they have, just like Ethiopia. So I just want to wrap up some of the genealogy of the Ethiopians so we can now segue into how Japheth gets tied into the Israelite bloodlines and the Ethiopians as well, and becomes one of the Ethiopian rulers. But we're going to focus more so in this on the Iranians and look at the genealogies, as I said. So back to the Ethiopians, the true ones, descendants of Keturah, Sheba, and of course Moses and Sephora. Can an Ethiopian change his skin, or a leopard his spots? Then may ye also do good that are accustomed to doing evil. We have Edom tied to Balaam at the time of Israel coming out of Egypt and returning to and re-entering the promised land. And the Edomite prophet of Balaam tries to curse Israel. And eventually what he does is that he has the Moabites send the women of Midian to have intercourse with the men of Israel openly in the camp. And then it's Phinehas, son of Levi, who has to drive a spear through these men who are going with the other nations so that a plague stops. All right, so here's an encounter with the Midianites. Now, these are the Keturah Midianites, all right? And of course, in her famous encounter with King Solomon, Queen Sheba conceives of Menelik, all right? The first Ethiopic king, son of Solomon, all right? And this is true Beta Israel. So 1 Kings 10:1 has the Queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon concerning the name of Yahuwah and came to prove him. And when the Queen of Sheba had seen all Solomon's wisdom and the house he had built, she gave the king 120 talents of gold and spices, very great store, and precious stones. And there came no more such abundance of spices as these which the Queen Sheba gave to King Solomon. And it's important to note, again, she sought the name of the Most High. She came to prove Yahuwah, not Solomon. All right. She tested him, but she wanted to know Yahuwah. All right. And so what we know about King Solomon is that he loves many strange women together with the daughter of Pharaoh, says 1 Kings 11. And the key we have to him being intimate with Sheba is literally in the scripture. It says, King Solomon gave unto the Queen of Sheba all her desire whatsoever she asked, besides that which Solomon gave her of his royal bounty. So she turned and went to her own country and her own servants. So the word for bounty is yad, which means the hand. It means the axle of a tree, grafted into a tree, right? So this is the tree of the house of Israel. All right. And it also means phallus. And so it means he gave her his bounty. That means another word for it was that he filled her. So he inseminated her. So she became pregnant. All right. If that makes sense. And she's very unique amongst all of the women, aside from the Shunammite, who interacted with Solomon, because she's the only woman who is named other than the Shunammite. All right. And of course, the queen of the south shall rise up in judgment with this generation and condemn it. For she came from the uttermost parts of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and behold, a greater than Solomon is here. And so it is her descendant, the Queen Candace of Ethiopia, who visits, her eunuch visits Jerusalem and receives Messiah. But I'm mentioning her here because this is the mother of Menelik. And then it is all these other nations who go on to become a part of Ethiopia, because as we saw in the previous series, part of the series, all of those Elamites, the sons of Keturah, the Ethiopians, were all dwelling in the midst of the Midianites, etc. So these are the other nations who actually have promises from Yah, and it includes the Medo-Persians, that the dromedaries of Midian and Ephah and Nebaioth, the firstborn of Ishmael, and as well the Medo-Persians have a part in the kingdom of Jerusalem for the role that they play in their faithfulness to Yah in the land, and then their faithfulness to Israel ultimately as well. They also went against Israel, but they're not the bad seeds of Ham and Japheth. They are the better seeds. Nobody's perfect, as we see through the story of life. So we see these are the dynasties coming out of Sheba from the time of Solomon and Sheba, and all the way up to Menelik the first, through to Candace and the Ethiopian eunuch. So they all know the scriptures and have the scriptures. And then suddenly, when we get further along, late into the Aksumite Empire, into the 400s, after the fall of Israel, all right? The Christianization of the world and the Aksumite Empire. So this is the time of the rise of Prester John. And now we have the Zagwe dynasty, which is a non-Solomonic dynasty. These are the other mixed multitude nations ruling through the Ethiopic Empire. And the reason why I'm showing you this right now, and like I said, Amalek, I have here Edom as Amalek, but yeah, there's also the Ammonites rule, that mixed multitude of those, the Cathay, the Phoenicians, the Sidonians, all of their identity, various names, they all ruled, I believe, through the Ethiopic Empire. But what I'm trying to show you here is, I believe that Edom moved to Genghis Khan or Genghis Khan. But I want to also show you that one of the transitional phases during this time in the 1500s was Gondar, the Medo-Persian Gondophares. Remember, we mentioned him in the last series. Prester John mentioned Gondophares being one of the rulers in Medo-Persia. And he was also an Ethiopic Empire ruler. All right? And so I just want you to see those connections. And remember, the true Ethiopians are Beta Israel, but then there's all these other nations, the Carthaginians, the Byzantines, the Samaritans, Kutha, Cathay. These are the various names that they were given. There's the Phoenicians, the Britons, the Scots, the Anglo-Saxons. Those are the Japhethites. And one of the things I want you to remember was that the Midianite descendants of Keturah and Abraham are actually the ones who sold Joseph into slavery to the Egyptians. They were going to sell him to the Ishmaelites, right? But it's both the Ishmaelites and the Midianites that participated in the sale of Joseph. And this is who participated in the sale of Israel into the transatlantic slave trade. See, there's a promise to the dromedaries of Midian and Ephah and Nebaioth, the firstborn descendant of Ishmael. All of these will greet Israel upon returning to the land. All right? The bad seed is we remember that David slew Goliath, and Goliath was a Philistine, and the Philistines, as I've said, are the descendants of Japheth. A lot of people like to pretend that they are the descendants of Ham, but they are not. They just dwelt in Chata with Ham, and I've proved that over and over again. So go and check out my video on the tribe of Dan, the peaceful multitude left behind, or the last to come in. It's very detailed, so please watch it. I'm just going to review a little bit of it here. They are not numbered among the 144, and we go into the Philistines. But David slew the Philistine. The Philistines were also known as Gomorrah, the Gomorites. All right, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is grievous. Gomorrah means submersion. All right, so there is a Canaanite connection to the Gomorites, who are called Amorah by the Hebrews in Sodom and Gomorrah. It's clear Gomer is the root word of Gomorrah. People say it's the Amorites or the Hamites, but we'll see that that's not true. How else is Gomer linked to Canaan? The Kibber Nagast has this to say in the introduction. All right, so the Kibber Nagast is the glory of kings, the glory of the Nagas, the kings. Okay, it says the wickedness of the children of Cain multiplied at length until at length in the greatness of their filthiness they introduced the seed of 4 concerning Noah, the ass to the mare, the mule into being, which Elohim had not commanded, and even like those who give their children who are believers unto those who deny Elohim, and their offspring become the seed of the filthy Gomorites. All right, one half of them being good and the other half of them being an evil seed. For those who do this wickedness, their judgment is ready and their error in lasting. So the Gomorites, the Philistines, stole their land. Their land was in the land of Dan when he went to claim it. That's where they were. All right. And we know the story of Samson and the Philistines. Like I said, go and watch that video on the tribe of Dan. And when we look for Joppa, so Joppa was a Canaanite port city according to McClintock's Bible Dictionary. And it is in the list of Palestinian cities captured by Thutmose. Joppa remained one of the key Egyptian administrative cities in Palestine from that time until the Israelite invasion. So it was a colony of Egypt, but one in the same place. See, and this is actually in the Bible. So when they're talking about a close proximity Egypt in the Bible, and they're talking about Palestine, they're one in the same area, and the tribe of Dan. And it's important to understand that. And Alexander the Great favored the city, for he changed its name from Yapho, Japheth, to Joppa, a new name that honored the daughter of Geralim of the Winds. Alexander also established a mint in Joppa. Also mentioned Abimelech, king of Gerar, in Genesis 20. All right, so Abimelech, this is in the land of the Philistines. All right, so in addition, it says that the Japhetic Gentiles are Philistines per Genesis 10:14. So this is when it mentions that they came from Caphtor. They are connected, they are the Gomorites. So even though they've been dwelling there for over 4,000 years, from the time of Sodom and Gomorrah, it doesn't make it their land. This is a narrative they're selling you because they're showing you how persecuted the Philistines are, so that when Israel gets back to that land, because that is part of the northern kingdom, that's not Jerusalem, but that's the northern kingdom, they'll say, well, you can't genocide us because we believe in a different God, because that's what the other fake Israelites did. And it'll be like, Yah's going to be like, it doesn't matter. If you don't believe in me, then you're not mine and you don't belong in my land. So Gomer obviously is Gog, the chief of the land of Magog. So this is the difference between the Javanites and Madai and the Iranians. All right. Gog and Magog and Gomer are not Javan and Madai and Tarshish, different sons. They're all different sons. Important to remember that. All right, so traditional identifications, Josephus placed Gomer and the Gomerites in Anatolian Galatia, so that's around the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. For Gomer founded those whom the Greeks now call Galatians, but were called Gomerites. Galatia, in fact, takes its name from the Gauls, the Celts who were there. However, the later Christian writer Hippolytus of Rome assigned Gomer the ancestor of the Cappadocians, neighbors of the Galatians. So it gets pretty reedy over here, and they're tied to Germania, Garmania. Gar usually refers to the giants, or gargantuan giant, Garmanians, and Gomer. The Cretan origins of the Philistines has been deduced not so much from the name Caphtor as that of the Kerethites. All right, so the name in Hebrew bears a close resemblance to Crete, Cretians. So rather than Catholics or Kiriath, it's really Cretans. So these are all the various references. You can pause to read if you want, but long story short, the Gomerites, the Philistines are Gomerites. They've been in the land of Israel for over 4,000 years, from even the time of Sodom and Gomorrah, but that is not their land. And they are not Madai, they are not Tarshish, they are not the Medo-Persians. They are more like the Vikings and the giants and Gog and Magog and Tubal-Cain and the Germans. All right, so I hope that clears some stuff up for you with that. Let's get into the blessing of Japheth to begin with this, so we can understand how they're woven into being one of the grafted in branches into the everlasting tree of life, Yahushua HaMashiach. We're going to start by looking at Japheth's blessing in Genesis 9. Of course, we know that Ham uncovered his father's nakedness, meaning he slept with his mother, and Shem and Japheth went in and covered up their mother. They went in backwards, covered up the nakedness of their father, their mother, with a cloak, and then their father Noah blesses them. But it's kind of a mixed blessing, but clearly these two become the favored sons of Noah. And Noah said, "Blessed be the Elohim of Shem, and Canaan shall be his bondservant. May Yahuwah make room for Japheth, and let him dwell in the habitations of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant." So there's this blessing that they're going to dwell together, and that Yah will enlarge Japheth. And so this seems like a bit of a mixed blessing. And so let's go more into the identity of Japheth. So let's look at the name Japheth. Again, the scripture says, Yah shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. So he will dwell in the tents of Shem. That means that he will live in the land and houses of Shem. And he will also marry the women of Shem, because they are also tents. All right? And Canaan shall be his servant. So here's his name with the Yod at the beginning. So the first part of Japheth's name is actually Yah, is actually the Creator's name. Not with the H of praise, but he does have the Yod at the beginning of his name, then the face and mouth. So he is reflecting the face of Yah. And the Tav, which is a sign, that's the T. And then the man with his hands up praising Yah. So Japheth, all right? And so this is the description in Strong's is a privative root to be open, to make roomy, usually figuratively, in a mental or moral sense. Now, the Gentiles are known for being abstract, not necessarily concrete. Everything is abstract, symbolic, philosophical. That's Western thought. It's not concrete, which is Eastern and Southern. So to be simple, to allure, deceive, enlarge, entice, flatter, persuade, a silly one. Okay? So this is, it's a blessing and a curse, because you have a picture of someone who is led by the hand, the right hand of Yah, to his face and his presence, and to his tree, his sign, his cross of praise, but also they are led to something that is a trap they fall into. Okay? It's also a trap. And when we look at the word, the second half of his name, Patah, 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 so it's like Yapatah, Yapatah, and it means enlarge. But it's also like the name Put, which is, he was the ruler of Egypt, who is associated with Buddha. Okay, so it's like Yah meets Buddha. So Japheth is set up to be a priest, represent Yah, but he falls into Egypt. He falls into Babylonianism. Okay? And we're going to find in terms of his lands are in Babylon. So we're going to find that the sort of bad seed of Japheth, Gomer, Gog, Magog, Tubal, Cain, are the ones who Ham mixed in with very quickly. He mixed in with Gomer of Gomorrah, Sodom and Gomorrah, the firstborn son. All right? Because Satan always wants your firstborn. But it's a two-edged sword that Japheth has, because he has Madai and Yavan, who turned out to be his good seed, his kind of king and priest seed that contrasts with Levi, we could say, and Yehuda, Judah. But of course, as we know, Ashkenaz is the firstborn son of Gomer, and I believe that, you know, these are the Tartarians who then went on to become the Jews of today, who claim to be the Jews of today. So that would be, you know, the not so good seed. And if you want to look at the term enlarge, you find out that this is a test, and when you compare the word, this is probably the only use of it is in the name of Japheth, I think. But just to encourage you, Acts 15:14 says, Simeon has declared how Yahuwah at first did visit the Gentiles to take out of them a people for his name. Hence, Japheth has his name, has Yah's name in it. And Yah says his people are called by his name. Okay? So that's an encouragement. But when we look at all other words for enlarge, when we look at the prayer of Jabez, much loved by Americans, and Jabez called on the Elohim of Israel, saying, oh, that thou would bless me indeed and enlarge my territory, my coast, and that thou hand might be with me, and thou would keep me from evil, that it may not grieve me. And Yahuwah granted him that which he requested. So the word for enlarge is rabbah, which means multiply, increase, much, many, more, great, long, store, exceedingly greater, abundance, and all kinds of other miscellaneous terms for enlarge. But this one involves flattering, persuading, a silly one, enticing, deluding. Okay, it's a trick. All right? So, but here's the blessing. Japheth does have the face of Yah, okay? And the actual word for beautiful is Yafa. Japheth. You know, the youngest children in families are often very beautiful. They've got the favor, and Japheth is the youngest son. There's a lot of misinformation out there where people say that he's the eldest, but he is not. This is what we've just read in Jubilees, which is an extremely reliable book. When you compare it to the Bible, it just locks steps with it. So it's got very few errors in it. But Japheth means beautiful, fair, or handsome, okay? And of course, that's what Yah is. And so there's a scripture that talks about the Israelites, that when they go, Deuteronomy 21, forth to war against your enemies, and Yahuwah, thy Elohim, delivers them into your hands, and thou hast taken them captive, and you see among the captives a beautiful woman, and has a desire unto her, that thou wouldst have her for thy wife, then thou shalt bring her home to thine house. Strong's H3303 is also associated with Rachel's beauty, with Joseph's fair looks, with Rebecca and Isaac, and with Dawid. So this is really, the association is having the face of Yah, having the face of the sons and daughters of Noah. The sons and daughters of Noah had a very particular look about them. Okay, you could recognize them, a symmetry, which you would call beautiful. And we see in Yashar, that Chittim and Tubal actually fight over the beauty of the women of Tubal. And so in Jasher 17 it says that all who delighted in the beauty of women went to the daughters of Tubal and took wives of them, and the sons of men, kings and princes who greatly delighted in the beauty of women, took wives in those days from the daughters of Tubal. And there's this big war that happens between Chittim and Tubal because they won't give them any of their women, because Tubal is defeated by Chittim in a war. So they're like, okay, you're not getting any of our women. So this creates a big, huge war. But there's another example as well in Jasher 58, further along, where there is Jania, whom we spoke about in the 4th episode of Ham's Lot. And this damsel was exceedingly beautiful, comely, and intelligent, and there was none like unto her for beauty and wisdom throughout the land of Chittim. And it says that Angus of Ham wanted to marry her and set off to marry her, you know, in agreement with the children of Chittim. And then one of the people from Chittim, the kings from there, says, no, we want her. And this creates a whole war. This is one of the points in time where Ham, we see clearly, is mixing in with Chittim, one of the sons of Japheth, and also mixing in with Janus, the Janisarians. So early on, all these tribes mixed in. These tribes of Ham mixed in with Japheth. His seed became corrupt while Israel rose. I'm going into this to show you that there was favor, but there was a curse as well. So blessing and cursing. And this is part of Japheth's identity. And also, as we know, salvation and deliverance is about confessing the sins of your fathers. And this is why it's important to understand this. So to try to put it shortly, Japheth is the true Gentile of Gentiles. And the fallen angel seed is usually called Gar. Genesis 10 tells us, by these were the isles of the Gentiles, Gawi is the Hebrew word, divided in their lands, everyone after his tongue, after his families, in their nations, Gawi. So Goy or Gawi is a word for nations, but you see the Gentiles of Japheth are called Gawi. This is the genealogy here. The sons of Japheth were Gomer and Magog and Madai and Yavan and Tubal and Meshach and Tiras. I highlight Madai and Yavan because that's the third and fourth born son, which line up and correspond with Levi and Judah. Okay? The third and the fourth, those are holy, perfect, good numbers. Okay? And then the sons of Gomer were Ashkenaz. Once again, the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, son of Gomer, Ashkenaz. Ashkenaz is not Israel. Ashkenaz is Japheth. However, they got the identity. Why? Firstborn son. Satan goes after the firstborn son. So Ashkenaz was the firstborn son of the firstborn son. And Riphath and Togarmah, and the sons of Yavan, Elisha. So now we're going into the third son. This is going to be kind of maybe a little bit of a priestly line. You get into a lot of trouble, but do a lot of good. So, sons of Yavan, Elisha, notice Eli. So that's like a priest or an angel, right? And Tarshish, and Chittim, and Dudanim. So the dudes, Chittim becomes Rome. Tarshish are the ships that ship the gold. And Elisha, okay? So these are important names to remember. By these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, everyone after his tongue, after his families, in their nations. So when we go to the word Gawi again, notice these are the sons of Shem after their families, after their tongues, in their lands, after their Gawi nations. These are the sons of now Ham. We're going from Shem to Ham. These are the sons of Shem, of Ham, after their families, after their tongues, in their countries, and in their Gawi nations or Goy nations. But notice when we go to the top here, it is a general term that is applied to nations, all nations outside of Yasharel, but it was first applied, at least it is in first mention, to Japheth. One of the things that we want to say about Japheth is that when Yah destroyed the Tower of Babel, he was the first thing that the nations had all said. They didn't want to spread out. They didn't want to obey Yah and multiply and do everything he had commanded. Instead, they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to heaven so that we may make a name for ourselves." And Yah doesn't like it when you want to make a name for yourself over glorifying him. And this was one of the problems that Japheth had, okay? And we'll get into that because we're going to go into a little bit more about Japheth. He's blessed, but like Israel, he's also cursed. So it says, these are the families of the children of Japheth according to their cities and their languages, when they were scattered after the tower, and they called their cities after their names and occurrences. And these are the names of their cities according to their families, which they built in those days after the tower. So the issue was they sought to make a name for themselves. And when they did something, their occurrences, they would name their cities after that, okay? But it seems like he gets his land enlarged, but not for truth. And his head is enlarged a little bit. And instead of giving glory to Yah's name, he gives glory to his own name, okay? But Yah's promise to the Gentiles, and this was in earlier ages, not so much anymore, because they didn't obey this, but he said that his name would be praised among them, which is true. There are many people who still teach that among the Gentiles. A lot of Gentiles I've learned a lot of stuff from who are still following Yah. But this, I'm just giving you an idea of the error, the mistake that was made. And so here's a perfect example of Japheth going into other people's lands, actually, and naming those lands after himself. But it's also both a blessing and a curse. So according to Jubilees 10:35, and Japheth and his sons went towards the sea and dwelt in the land of their portion, and Madai saw the land of the sea, and it did not please him. And he begged a portion from Ham and Ashur and Arphaxad. Okay, so the last two are Shemites, his wife's brother. So he married a Shemite woman, so a tent of Shem, okay, because the woman is the house, the skirt. And he dwelt in the land of Media near to his wife's brother until this day. And he called his dwelling place and the dwelling place of his sons Media, after the name of their father Madai. Today, this is the Medo-Persians in Damascus. And so there it is, Japheth naming his lands after himself. And he is not in his lands in this capacity. But the blessing is he's mixed in with the line of Shem, which because of his blessing, he and Shem will dwell together. And eventually Japheth will dwell in the tents of Shem. But this is also an example of Japheth having to, or tending to, name his lands after himself for his glory. So this is a blessing and a curse ultimately. So we already mentioned that one of Yavon's sons was Elijah, Elysian Fields, the Isles of Elijah. You may think that, that's the Mediterranean, but no, it's Japan, Greenland, Nova Scotia, and Canada, and basically the four islands around the Rubus Negro, the magnetic North Mountain. Actually, three of them belong to him, belong to Japheth. So those are the Isles of Elisha, and that is the shipping connection that Tarshish has to being the major shipping Gentiles of the world, because they just go up around the North Pole and shortcut and ship all over the earth. Okay, so we've already discussed how Yavon is one of the sons of Japheth, and he's kind of in the priestly line. And his name, Elisha, actually means in Hebrew, Elohim of the coming one. And of course, and Elohim is salvation. Now, there are two prophets who have a similar name, and that is from amongst the tribe of Israel, right? And that is the prophet Elisha, the Benjamite, who is a type of the apostle Shaul, apostle Paul, and he raised one of the wives of the prophets from the dead and multiplied bread for her, and he also slew the prophets of Baal, and he was taken up by Yahweh, okay? And then there's the prophet Elisha, again, which means Elohim is salvation, and he is the servant of the first Elijah, who got his double blessing and saw Elijah go up to the heavens in a chariot. And there's also a reference to him going to Damascus. And this Elijah also heals one of the kings of Damascus, Ben-Hadad, king of Syria. Now, this is the land where the Medo-Persians are, okay, where Madai has mixed in with Shem, okay? Remember, Madai went to live in the land of Shem and mixed in with him, marrying a Shemitic woman. And so what happens is that Elijah comes to Damascus, and Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, was sick, and it's told to him saying, the man of Elohim has come hither. And what he does is he turns him from leprous white back to brown. His skin is made normal and melanated again. Okay? So this is a type and a precursor of the changing of Japheth back into a son of Yah after he's been through the defilement of Tartaria. And keep in mind, when I refer to Tarshish, we'll get into it a little bit, but that is Tartaria eventually, because that's where the prince of Tyre comes from. And Hasatan rules over the oceans, over the seas. And so Tyre and Tarshish are ruling the seas. And so this is how they get dipped into that dark world of Tartaria. Okay? And they have to be redeemed from it. But what I'm trying to show you is the priestly connection to Damascus and to Yavon and to Madai. Okay? To Elisha and Madai. Now, in connection with Eliazar of Damascus, okay, we know he's from Medo-Persia because he's from Damascus, and this is the number one servant of Abraham. When Abraham is wondering about his offspring because he doesn't have offspring from Sarah, the daughter of the promise, he says to Yahweh, Yahweh Elohim, what will thou give me, seeing I go childless, and the steward of my house is this Eliazar of Damascus? So the Gentiles are stewarding over the house of Israel. And this actually magnifies in prophecy to the point where they dwell in the tents of Shem and the land of Shem and are stewarding over the house of Israel as stewards. Not actual Israel, but thinking they're Israel. Okay? But Yah promises him that the child will come from his own loins. And then furthermore in Genesis 24, has a servant, Eliazar of Damascus, Eliazar the Gentile of Damascus, stewarding over the house of Abraham, is sent to go and get the bride, to pay the bride price for the bride. Now, the bride of Isaac, Rebecca, it is Eliazar who goes and gets the bride and pays the bride price. And to return her, bring her to the promised land and her husband. Okay, so she is with Laban. She is in the house of Laban. Okay, she's in the house of the house. That's what ban means, house. Some people think it means white, and it also does, but it means the house. So that's the house of Aram. Okay, that's the house of Eber. And so he goes and gets the bride from the house of Eber and brings her to the house of Abraham to marry Isaac. But before he does this, he makes a covenant with Abraham in Genesis 24, verse 9. And the servant put his hand under the thigh of his master Abram and swore to him concerning this matter. So when you swear a covenant, a lot of times they'll have you put your hand on someone else's loin, like not on their, right on their private parts, but the loin is this also under the side of the leg where the seeds are. Okay? So there was a covenant made here between some brothers. Okay, there's a brotherly covenant here. And he does fulfill the task of returning the bride, but it's a perpetual covenant because he's got to return the bride before the end of time as well. And so this is tying into what Cyrus, the servant of Yah, will do, because eventually it is Cyrus who returns in Israel to build the second temple, and he is a Medo-Persian. So this is how I'm tying this all in, family. Be patient with me, stay with me. So what is this connection to Damascus? Well, Damascus holds on to the scepter of Israel. Damascus, Eliazar, is a steward over the house of Israel during the times of the Gentiles. Damascus is running the house of Israel. And Damascus is prophesied to fall before the times of the Gentiles are over, and it fell in 2014. I used to think that the destruction of Damascus in 2014 was the sign of, the end times, but I believe that Damascus was actually destroyed by Edom, actually multiple times by the Assyrians, but it actually was destroyed. The Medo-Persian Empire was destroyed by Edom in the early ADs, and then later on in more recent history around the 1500s, after Gondophares was able to be one of the rulers over the grand Ethiopian Empire. And so the people representing the Medo-Persians today, the Iranians, are really only part of the true Medo-Persians, because Medo-Persia is not where they're calling Iran today. It was closer to India. Susa was closer to India. So they're kind of doing their own little small scale version of prophecy, but, I can't really tell, what the real or fake prophecy is. It's very much possible that this is actually what's happening. But saying all of this to say that the Medo-Persians really fell and have really suffered a lot of distress and been pushed way too far by the fake Rev 2939 people and Babylon. And the reason was because of betraying Israel. And so Yah then brought them to a point where they would once again unify with Israel. And that's where we are today. And so I think Damascus was destroyed a long time ago. And the Iranians and Medo-Persians in India, Pakistan, so on, have been suffering under the thumb of America and Babylon ever since. So there was a time in history around the 1200s, once the Mongol hordes began to take over, that the features of the Medo-Persians and the Russians began to change, because the Russians were also very dark people. And my belief is that, they all mixed in with the Ethiopians and kind of were pushed further and further into Africa because they were darker skinned people. And that's why I say, we have to be a little bit on guard for, those who are claiming to be the Iranians today or the prophetic timing of things. But, I'm proceeding in good faith. The fortress also shall cease from Ephraim, and the kingdom from Damascus, and the remnant of Syria, and they shall be as the glory of the children of Israel, saith the Most High of Hosts. So the glory of the Medo-Persians, the Damascans, the Assyrians, all of these groups, it was put down. And these are the descendants of Yavan, Madai, Tarshish, etc. Their glory became naught. And so this is what they were judged for, and this is why they're rising up now. But so after this punishment. Thus saith Yahuwah, for 3 transgressions of Damascus, and for 4 I will not turn away the punishment thereof. This is why Iran is always under attack. Now, but it says, for 4 I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they have threshed Gilead. Who's Gilead? Israel. With threshing instruments of iron, the iron kingdom of Rome, the final kingdom, the final beast, because they carried away captive the whole captivity to deliver them up to Edom, and remembered not the brotherly covenant. Japheth forgot his covenant with Shem. And so they are going into judgment for this. And that's why they're very persecuted, Iran. Okay? But it's that whole region, India, Iran, all of that is Medo-Persia. Now, what was the beginning of Damascus and their salvation? Because Paul was the apostle to the Gentiles, right? And so at the moment he is chosen to become an apostle, his mission is to go to the Gentiles, not in Rome, but in Damascus. Listen, so please watch this video, Eliazar, Return the Bride, for more details on this. It'll give you a lot of revelation about Esau's role and your role if you're a Gentile in the return of the bride and your own salvation. So, in Acts 9:3, as Shaul or Paul journeyed, he came near Damascus, and suddenly there shined right about him a light from heaven. So he was near Damascus when this light shone upon him. And Shaul rose from the earth, and when his eyes were opened, he saw no man, but they led him by the hand and brought him where? Into Damascus. They brought him into Damascus. And it came to pass that as I made my journey and was come nigh, this is his testimony, unto Damascus about noon, suddenly there shone from heaven a light, great light, round about me. So he's in his testimony, to the Israelites, to all of Israel, he says he was on his way to Damascus when this mission was put upon him, and he was awakened in Yahusha, who some know as Jesus. Okay, and I said, what shall I do, Yahuwah? And Yahuwah said unto me, arise and go into Damascus, and there in Damascus, it shall be told thee of all things which are appointed for thee to do. So salvation comes to the Gentiles in Damascus first. Why? Because that's Japheth. Why? Because that's Shem. Shem has to be redeemed because that's the firstborn son, right, of Noah, simultaneously with Japheth. And so he goes there first. This is the promise to the Gentiles to possess the house of Israel, all right, through Cyrus, And we'll go into Cyrus. It says, and your children shall not be fruitful. This is what is said to Israel. For they have despised my commandment and done the thing that is evil before me. Your houses will I give to a people that shall come, which having not heard of me, yet shall believe me, to whom I have showed no signs, yet they shall do what I have commanded them. They have seen no prophets, yet they shall call their sins to remembrance and acknowledge them. This is what Yahushua says. If you confess your sins, he's faithful and just to forgive you your sins and cleanse you from all unrighteousness. I will take to witness the grace of the people to come, whose little ones rejoice in gladness, though they have not seen me with bodily eyes, yet in spirit they believe the thing that I say. Yet in spirit they believe the thing that I say. So they've seen no prophets, but yet they believe. They see no signs, but they do what is commanded. Now, brother, behold what glory, and see the people that cometh from the east, unto whom I will give for leaders Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Hosea, and Amos, and Michael, and Yoel, and Abidas, and Ionas, Nahum, Agias, Zechariah, and Malachi, which is called also the angel of the Most High. So this is the promise. Is there a prophecy of the Gentiles being grafted in and being given Israel's blessing and Israel going into the final punishment? Yes, Deuteronomy 32:20. And he said, Yahuwah said, and I will hide my face from them. I will see what their end shall be, for they are a very forward generation, children in whom there is no faith. This is what he says of Israel. They have moved me to jealousy, which is not of Yah. They have provoked me to anger with their vanities, and I will move them to jealousy with those which are not a people, and I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation, silly one. For a fire is kindled in mine anger, and shall burn into the lowest hell, and shall consume the earth with her increase, and set on fire the foundations of the mountains. And I will heap mischiefs upon them, and I will spread my arrows upon them. So Yah is going to punish Israel, he says, when he cuts them off at the fall of the temple. And he will move them to jealousy with who? The Gentiles. With a foolish nation, a silly one. Okay? Now that's not entirely what Japheth is, because Yah holds their faith in high esteem, because they believe right away without seeing, right? But nonetheless, this is the promise. However, Yahuwah said in Jeremiah 33:25-26, thus saith Yahuwah, if my covenant be not with day and night, and if I have not appointed the ordinances of heaven and earth, then will I cast away the seed of Jacob and David my servant, so that I will not take any of his seed to be rulers over the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, for I will cause their captivity to return and have mercy on them. So this is Yah's promise. He will never completely reject Israel, or else he will neglect his ordinances with the heavens and the earth. So replacement theology is just a myth. According to the first book of Ezra 1:1, it says, now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, the word of Yahuwah by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled. Yahuwah stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, and he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom to put it also in writing, saying, thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, Yahuwah Elohim of heaven hath given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he hath charged me to build him an house at Jerusalem, which is in Yehudah, for Jacob my servant's sake, and Israel my elect. And Yah said, I have called you by your name. I have named you, though you have not known me. So he's speaking of Cyrus. I am Yahuwah, and there is no other. There is no Elohim besides me. I will gird you, though you have not known me. that they may know from the rising of the sun to its setting that there is none besides me. I am Yahuwah, and there is no other. I form light and create darkness. I make peace and create calamity. I, Yahuwah, do all of these things. And so Cyrus commissioned this temple building, and then in Ezra 6:14 it says that the elders of the Jews builded and prospered through the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah son of Iddo, and they builded and finished it according to the commandment of God of Israel, Yahuwah of Israel, and according to the commandment of Cyrus and Darius and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. And this house was finished on the 3rd day of the month of Adar, which was in the 6th year of the reign of Darius the king. So remember, the final, Yahusha is going to return on the 3rd day. All right? So this is where we're coming into the double prophecy. All right? And so Cyrus, the Medo-Persians, will do this again. Now, I don't know that, this whole situation isn't a setup, fake return, or a true one. I just don't honestly know. I believe the timing is right, though, for our return. But anyway, the promise made to Cyrus was, thus saith Yahuwah to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden to subdue nations before him, and I will loose the loins of kings, to open before him the 2-leaved gates, and the gates shall not be shut. All right, so why am I reading that to you? Because those are the 2-leaved gates of Babylon, the Iron Kingdom. And so he is the catalyst to the exodus of Israel. What happened was Cyrus freed Israel from the first Babylon, and then he overcame Babylon and ruled the world. And so he's going to do it again. And he's going to rebuild the temple again. And that is a temple made without human hands. And this is why he's called the right hand, because Israel is also called the right hand of Yah, and he is one of the grafted in nations. And so this is why Isaiah 44:28 says that of Yahuwah, that he saith of Cyrus, he is my shepherd and shall perform all my pleasure, even saying to Jerusalem, thou shalt be built, and to the temple thy foundation shall be laid. But as I've said, we still don't know, because remember, the Catholic Church created the false Judaic system, the false Christian religion, as well as Islam. And a lot of these people are currently caught up, especially the leaders in Islam. And so we don't know if it's a conspiracy. And this is why we have to talk about the 4 carpenters and the 4 beasts. Because when we discuss the 4 carpenters, their intention is to sharpen Israel for their own use as they free Israel at this time. So it's going to be a bit of a struggle. But go ahead and watch my other videos on the 144, the rise of the 144, because you will clearly see all of the things which take place in the battle when the Carmanians, the Iranians, and the kings of the south of Africa all come over to North America for war. What you're going to see is that Yahuwah rages against them, so that he makes them fight each other anytime they try to attack Israel. So, and then Yah appears and he begins to pour out his wrath, because they're his instruments, right? So it's not going to be a situation which they can control. But the reason why, of course, America, Gog and Magog, the true Gog and Magog and Canaan want this war, is because they're hoping to prosper in the chaos. But the Antichrist has already been brought in, and another one will be brought in, but not until Israel escapes. All right, so once again, when Persia was lost, the people took on different features. All right, so Isaiah 13 and 17 says, "Behold, I will stir up the Medes against them, which shall not regard silver and gold, and they shall not delight in it." Isaiah 13:18 says, "They shall break the bows of the young man, and they shall have no mercy on your children, nor shall their eyes spare thy children. And Babylon, which is called glorious by the kings of the Chaldeans, shall be as when Yahuwah Elohim overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah." Why? Because it's Canaan and Gomer all over again. It's Sodom and Gomorrah. So here is from the Iran Daily News commentary, literally the tail wagging the dog. But these are basically the Gomerites and these are the Canaanites. All right, so here's the other scripture which is describing the times that we are in, Jeremiah 51:27. So basically the Medo-Persian invaders are under the command of Cyrus from the regions of the north of Babylon. And what it says in Jeremiah 51:27 is, "And I will recompense to Babylon and to all the Chaldeans that dwell there all their mischiefs that they have done to Zion before your eyes, saith Yahuwah. Behold, I'm against thee, the ruined mountain that destroys the whole earth, and I will stretch out my hand upon thee, and I will roll thee down upon the rocks, and will make thee as a burnt mountain." So this is the fall of Babylon. "They shall not take from thee a stone for a corner, nor a stone for a foundation, for thou shalt be a desolation forever, saith Yahuwah." So nothing of Babylon is going to be considered any good to anybody. They lay no good foundation. They have no substance. "For thou shalt be a desolation forever, saith Yahuwah. Lift up a standard in the land, sound the trumpet among the nations, consecrate the nations against her, raise up kings against her by me, that for the people of Ashkenaz. Set against her engines of war, bring up against her horses as a multitude of locusts, bring up nations against her, even the king of the Medes and of the whole earth, his rulers and all his captains." So you see, these are the Medo-Persians going against Ashkenaz. Okay, I've shown this in multiple videos before. But Ashkenaz exalted himself to try to fulfill the vision, but he will fall. And we'll review that prophecy again at the end. I'm always showing it, you know. Family, the really deceived Gentile channels are selling this whole crazy narrative of Israel being kicked out of the land and having to later return and be redeemed and become the 144. It's like 70 AD never happened. Like it isn't 2,000 years after 70 AD. There is nothing in prophecy that says once Israel returns to the land that they'll ever, the scripture literally says you will no more go in and out. There's no prophecy of Israel leaving the land because these aren't the people. So the really satanic, the MASON channels who are masquerading as well, they are Christians. I was looking into who are the children of Tarshish today. It's kind of foggy because really everybody just kind of mixed in a lot into a mixed multitude. So it, like I said, I keep saying that it's kind of hard to tell who the Medo-Persians are because for the various reasons that I've shown you. And so I did do some research, and this is kind of stuff that I know, but I did ask DeepSeek some stuff, but I had to do a lot of programming with my own information. So some of it's coming back to some of the stuff that I've already shown you. But once again, on this ancient map, you can check for the references in the last video, but this map again seems upside down to us, but it's right side up, and they're calling this Tartaria, Tarshish in this area. This is the Black Sea here, Mare Negro, and this is the Caspian Sea, Mare Caspiv. All right, and so they're showing Tartaria as here, and then going into the Mediterranean, and then this goes, these two great waterways go out of the Caspian into the Persian Gulf, as I showed you before. But so here's some ideas around who's who today from Josephus in the Antiquities of the Jews, Book 1 and Chapter 6. Cyrus was the ancestor of the Thracians, not the Russians directly, all right? Now, why am I saying this? Because the ships of Tarshish are going to bring the sons and daughters from afar, from a Pharaoh land, from Egypt, from Babylon, right? So early Christian and Byzantine sources say the Scythians and the Hyperboreans were labels used for the northern people, the Slavs or the Russians, okay? So the Tyrians or Thracians were related to the Indo-Europeans, not the Russians directly. But what we see is there's a lot of mixing between the two, as I said earlier, okay? So Procopius, 6th century AD, called the Slavs sporoi, linking them to ancient Tyrus, okay? The ancient Thracians, though not Tarshish directly. So, like I said, we have Tartaria, we have Turkey, but as I've shown you in my other maps, this is a late representation of the land of Tartaria. It's called that once Japheth takes over the lands of Shem and starts calling them part of his empire of Tartaria. But this was not Tartaria before. I show you this all the time, family. Medieval European chronicles, Adam of Brenman, referred to the Baltic Sea as the Sea of Tarshish. So the Baltic Sea is basically the North Sea that is kind of around Norway and everything, all right? They call that the North Sea or the Baltic Sea, up where the Rubus Negro is. We'll take a look at the map in a second. All right, so that was associated with Tarsh, and it's linked with Brutus of Troy, a descendant of Japheth. All right, and then maps and etymologies. So Sebastian Munster's Cosmographia placed Tarshish in the far north, linking it with Russian river trade routes. See, you see in the associations, right? So if Russia is helping to deliver Israel, there's a connection there, right? And then Giles Fletcher in the 16th century, an English diplomat in Russia, noted that the Muscovites claimed descent from Meshach, all right? But what I think is really happening on up there was that there's a lot of mixing going on amongst the Japhethites. And see this area here on this particular map, this is called Galatia. So right above, Norway and stuff like that is called Galatia. All right. And this area here is called Scythia, the Scythian Ocean. So we'll take a look at it on a better map in a minute. But Tarshish may derive from the Akkadian Tarsisi. The Russian Varangians or Vikings were called Rus, probably from the Old Norse of Rur or rowing, Rus, linking them to maritime trade like Tarshish. Well, if they're at all linked to the Scythians, they would be, Japheth and his sons would be all, including the Vikings, going around these areas around the Rubus Negro up north on this map. Sorry, fam, I'm getting ahead of myself. Which was actually called the North Sea, okay? Then Christian writers, Jerome, Eusebius, associated the Thracians with northern barbarians. So we're getting similar people again and again. Herodotus places Phoenician traders in the Black Sea working with the Japhetic Scythians. So the Phoenicians are, again, it's a mix of all these mixed multitude bad seed tribes, which is what I like to call them. And the Danube and Dnieper-Don rivers were key trade routes for Tyre. But what we're going to see is that the land of the Danes was really around Greenland and northern Canada. Okay? So around the Hudson's Bay area. So like I said, they were floating around all in the North Sea around the New Rubus Negro, doing their trade in those areas. Plato's Criticus describes the ancient sea powers predating Greece, likely referencing the Black Sea as Tyre. But the Black Sea, of course, it's an ancient trade route. It was the Mare Negro, was part of the North African trade. So here's Mercator's map, the best representation. So we see Oceanus Scythius here, all right? And in the other map, this was called Mar Galatia, all right? And see Margla, pretty close. And if we go in really close on here, it says Danes here, right beside Greenland, all right, and Canada, all right? So these are the trading routes of the ships of Tarshish, all right? And here's a really clear picture. We see Tersh right by the Caspian Sea here, which is kind of around where Turkey is. So Turkey, Tartars, Tarshish, Tyre, Tartaria. You know what I mean? It's just an evolution in etymologies and a rebranding, right? And the Taurus Mountains, the Tyrus Mountains, all right? So it makes sense that there was a bit of migration, evolution in the names, a mixing of nations, especially if you were a very successful nation like these tribes. You look up here and it says Kalmuchaka Tartari up here right by the Caspian Sea again. So this is a much better representation of where Tyre originally was. It was originally around the Caspian Sea in Japheth's land, not by the Mare Negro. Herodotus places the Persians near the Caspian Sea, not today's southern Iran, okay? And the Persians were originally mountain dwellers in the Caucasus Mountains, not desert people, all right? Remember, Medi was more so in the land of Shem, and then they merged to become Medo-Persia, all right? Greek and Roman historians later shifted Persia to Iran, all right? So they're doing some machinations, all right? And so once again, Tarshish, the lost Tartarian Empire, it was a pre-Russian civilization in Siberia and Central Asia. And it shows, Tartarian maps show advanced trade routes matching Tarshish's biblical description. So Tartaria, Turkey, the Caspian Sea would be the original Tyre and Tarshish. And it was a Japhetic, Nordic Slavic Sea empire in the Caspian and Arctic region. And Russia, modern Russia may be its successor. Why am I asking this? Because I'm wondering if it's going to be the Russian ships of Tarshish. They've opened up the North Sea again, right? The Russians. So I'm wondering if they're going to be the ones to bring your sons and daughters from afar, all right? Even though they scattered, they may regather. And so we return again to these maps. And remember, I did like a real close-up on this map before, and we saw that the waterways going from the Black Sea, remember we've got the map right side, upside down now. So down here is Africa, all right? So this is the Caspian, and this is the Mare Negro, and the water goes from here into here. So this would have been, it would make sense for them to take rivers up north into the Baltic Sea, and it would make sense for them to take this river into the Mare Negro and down into the Mediterranean, or they had clear waterway routes down into where Iran is today and Medo-Persia is today, right? Down to the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean, okay? So you can see that they could have taken all these river and sea routes to do all of their trade. And they could go all the way across Canada along what I've told you already is the Great Euphrates, or across the Great Zangji River. So let's just take a look again at some other maps I've shown you before. So these are the original Caucasus Mountains. This is saying Tartary, Chinoisie, Grand Tartar. Here's the Caspian Sea. There we have Mer Noire. And so these are the Kashemus Mountains. And so once again, this is where Turkey would have really been. It would have been, here it says Tata, right here on the edge of India, just before this region here, which was where Medo-Persia was. It wasn't all the way further over. It was closer to being just right below the Caspian Sea. We've already been over these maps. Check out the last video. And look, we have Turkestan here, which is still there. The original Tyre, Turkestan. And again, the Kashemus Mountains here. All right, running up along northern so-called India. So I believe the geography's been shifted due to conquest and encroachment into the lands of Shem, which are North Africa. Although, like I said, this ocean septentrional, and it was called the Mare Tartary or Mare Muscovy, all right, and Gallia as well in this area. These would have been the great trade routes of the sons of Japheth. Right, so we're going to discuss the four beasts and the final beasts so that we can get a picture of where Prester John comes into all of this and comes out of it. And so you'll recall the last time we talked about the Medo-Persian Empire, last episode, was when Alexander the Great defeated it and then gave his empire over to four kings. Those four kings were then defeated by Rome. And after that, so Rome was the lion who basically flew across the waters from Rome in the west to land and become a man because he got converted and became saved by Yahushua HaMashiach and later became a Christian. And after that, with the destruction of Israel and Jerusalem, in comes the Scythians and the Gomerians, all the sort of wild men and bad seed of Japheth. And out of that arises Prester John's kingdom as the civilizing factor throughout. And this was the different Christ, the Prester king that came up. And of course, then after that, through the rise of the Huns, the Indo-Europeans become the Huns and then eventually take over as Sodom and Gomorrah to rule in the time that we're currently in as the fourth beast. So let's get into this. So let's just read here in Daniel 12 how long this beast system is going to last, when it starts, and when the beast system starts, how long it's going to last, and how long Israel is captive for before time ends. And we're also going to see that time maybe stretches out a little bit further past the deliverance of the Israelites as the nations are judged in the Great Tribulation. So what can we learn from Daniel to tell us about that? Well, in Daniel 12, it says just ignore this, I'm going to get back to it in a minute. And I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, and he held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and sware by him that liveth forever, that it shall be for a time, times, and half a time, when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. So what he's referring to here is the beast scattering the holy people, okay? And there are four beasts. We're going to go back to them in a minute. There's four beasts, and the fourth beast morphs into an even bigger, worse beast after Israel is delivered. But let's look at some more timelines here that are going to be relevant. And he says, he's very afraid, and he says, what shall be the end of these things? He says, okay, so all these things will be finished after a time, times, and half a time. So that's like 3.5 years, or 1,000, basically it's like 1,260 to 90 days, okay? And then he says, And I heard, but I understood not. And then I said, my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. And many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And from the time, so he gives him another time here, though he's generous, right? He says, from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, so that's after Mashiach, when the temple is destroyed and the daily sacrifice taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. All right, so that's 30 more days than this time times and half a time. All right. And a day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as a day. So just remember that. All right. Now, Revelation 2:14 says that the woman who is Israel was given the wings of an eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place where she is nourished for a time, times, and half a time from the face of the serpent. So that corresponds to the captivity of Israel after the beast is set up. All right. Both of them say a time, times, and half a time. All right. And Micah says, be in pain and labor to bring forth, O daughter of Zion, like a woman in travail, for now shalt thou go forth out of the city, and thou shalt dwell in the field, and thou shalt go even to Babylon, and there thou shalt be delivered. There Yahuwah shall redeem thee from the hand of thine enemies. So Babylon. So this Babylon, America, is the wilderness that Israel is captive to. She's captive to the four corners, but Judah in particular and the 10 tribes are in America, Babylon, and Canada. Okay. And Daniel 9 tells us regarding Israel being free when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, and all these things shall be finished. Okay. All right. After Israel is freed, then in the days of these kings, the kings of this is a beast with 10 horns. In the days of the 10 kings of the 10 horns, God will set up a kingdom. Yahuwah will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all of these kingdoms. So I'm about to show you what these kingdoms are, but I want you to be familiar with this time, times, and half a time, 1,260 to 1,290 days. Because from the time that the beast was set up was 1,260 years ago. All right? 1,260 years forwards to the release of Israel. That's the marker. And then there will be another 30 years after that there will be turmoil, and the kingdom will be being set up, and the Antichrist will be taking place, and it's kind of blurry. All right. But I just want you to keep those 1,260 days in mind. All right. And know that the kingdom of Israel will be set up at the same time that these other kingdoms are falling and their false Christ is set up. All right. Keep that in mind. That's the point of why I'm showing you this. So who are the 4 beasts who became this grotesque beast? The final beast, which I believe, as you know, is America. You don't have to agree with me, but I've got a ton of videos on it. All right, so it was these 4 kings that rose up out of the sea. They're also quoted in Revelation 13. And who are these beasts? Let's go through them. Daniel 7, the 4 beasts of end times. Now, I want you to notice what they look like. And as I've said before, Africa is symbolized by the lion. But this lion has the wings of an eagle. An eagle is usually symbolized by Ethiopia, also the north. It can be symbolized by Egypt as well as the north. Okay, the eagle, because Dan's standard, tribe of Dan's standard, was towards the north. So the eagle can symbolize America, Quetzalcoatl, Egypt, and it's also a symbol of Esau, Edom. So this is a kind of a mix between the Shemites and the northern nations. So it's Esau, Edom, as well as Japheth, all right? The bear is usually a symbol of Russia, of Japheth's land, and this bear has 3 ribs in its mouth. This is a bear that's destroying by eating and creating death. So it has 3 bones in its mouth. It's destroying kingdoms. And then the final image is a leopard with 4 wings, again, of an eagle. So let's go into the description. The first lion had eagle's wings, and I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked off, and it was lifted up to the earth, and made to stand on the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. So this is Rome, all right? Now, the tie-in to Esau is that Jasher tells us that Zipho, one of the sons of Edom, mixed in with the Romans, with Chittim, and a lot of the Edomite tribes became Rome. Again, also the symbol of the lion is Shem, and Edom, Esau is a Shemite. Now, Rome had to fly and float from the west all the way over to the south and the east to rule Jerusalem, all right? To rule in the south and the Middle East, the land of Shem, all right? And so that's why he's had wings. He had to fly over. But the heart of a man was given to him, because this is when Rome took Jerusalem down, but it was converted to Christianity. It was converted to Mashiach and then perverted it into Christianity. But that is why he became a man, and he got a man's heart. He got the heart of Hamashiach, the Son of Man's heart. All right? And so that's why he was able to stand on his feet like a man. He was no longer a chimera. He was no longer an abomination. He became human blood again through Mashiach. But of course, they got corrupted. And but once again, if you read Acts 29, you will find that Paul takes a journey to Rome. It takes him almost 30 days. And it takes about 15 days to take a boat to Rome now from Africa, okay, North Africa, from around the Mediterranean, all right? So now the second beast is Japheth. Behold, another beast, second like to the bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, arise, devour much flesh. And so this is the Goths, the Vandals, the Persians, and the Tartarians, all right, who rule in this period, all right? So it goes all the way from about 400, where Rome is taken down. Now, Rome is still Japheth, but these are these other Japhethites, the wilder, crazier ones, that take Rome down, and they invade it, along with the Persians, for about, from about the 400s to about 750 AD or CE, whatever you want to call it. And again, Edom is always in there. The Edomite Caliphate, the Umayyad Caliphate, their Arab iteration, their Arab brothers, help the Persians to take Constantinople. Constantinople is what Rome became, all right, after it split. Now, the final one here of these 3 is the leopard. And after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. So this is what I believe is Prester John, and I believe he's ruling secretly in all these other kingdoms, Esau, Edom, all right? And that's why he has 4 heads. The bear has ribs because he's destroying. That's what they say about the army from the north. A garden of Eden before them, and a wasteland and desert behind them. They destroy. So that's why he has ribs in his mouth. He destroys Israel. He destroys the kingdoms. Esau, Edom, then comes in and rules and heads them. How do we know this? Because the scripture says in Jeremiah 13:23, can an Ethiopian change his skin or a leopard his spots? Neither can you do good who are accustomed to doing evil. So one of the symbols of Esau Edom is the leopard. All right. It's actually the jaguar, otherwise known as the melanated panther, the jaguar. All right. And so this to me is Prester John, because we're going to find out he rules the whole world. I don't want to go too much into that, but here we see the Khazars, here we see Prester John, even ruling from 775 AD. It's made mention that he was conquering the American empire of Kalas, like the area of California. He was also ruling the Mongols in Eastern Asia, all right? And he was also he was bringing the kings of Salvanus Taltechus into Britain. Meanwhile, other Edomites, the Arab ones, are in that region. They're all in that region. They're also the Byzantines, because what? Esau Edom was also Rome. So he's secretly ruling behind the scenes, and he's ruling overtly in Africa. All right? Now, the thing I want you to notice about all of these groups is that the Tartarians, they started to really form, especially the Khazar conversion, was in the 8th century. That's in the 700s. It says 700 to 786 CE AD. That's when King Bulan ruled, converted to Judaism, and he also protected the Byzantine Empire. So these are Tartarians. This is the same thing, same time, around 775, Prester John. And now we look at Esau Edom hands over the black Arab identity to the Ottomans, the Slavs, the Janissaries, around 750, around the same time. All right? Charlemagne takes over the Byzantine Empire, throws it down, is crowned Charles I, Holy Roman Emperor Charles I, Charlemagne, is crowned by the Black Pope Leo III in 800 CE AD. All right? And the Byzantine Empire is undone. So it's the Black Popes handing power to the Black Edomites, the Black Edomites handing power to the white Japhethites, to the Arabs. They're all ruling at this time. And then the Huns come in and they take down Russia and Kiev and everything. And the Huns move all the way through into Britain. And so you have this fake monarchy, Saxe-Coburg Khan. You even have British William the Conqueror, who is a Japhethite. This is when you have these Khan who are Tubal-Cain. These are the Japheth Canaanites. And you have the Hamitic Canaanites, who are mixed with the Chinese, etc. All right? So they actually defeat Prester John. Mind you, he was ruling the whole world, including, like I just showed you the 3 Ethiopias in the last show, but it included China, Cathay, America, California, Florida, all of it. He was ruling the entire world. And, you know, there's this map here of Africa. And like I said before, it was acknowledged by John Ogilvie to be the lands of the mythic Prester John. And of course, you have the remains of the black nobility in Europe with all of these Saint Maurice, the knight images. And there's so many of them. It's like such a multitude of black nobility. It's hard to, you know, deny. And as well, we have, you know, the Marinigarum. We also have these other ancient maps calling the same region the Schwartz region. And so it's more my opinion that Esau Edom went into hiding and is kind of ruling behind the scenes, but he's certainly not as powerful as he was when he ruled in Ethiopia. However, I just want to make note of the fact that when he was ruling, it is noted the Atlas Geographicus, a complete system of geography written by Hermann Moll, that Judaism was the religion of ancient Africans for a long time and succeeded by Christianity. But Muhammad often prevailed in the 208th year of Hijra, when all the Jews, Christians, and professors of the African religion that could be found were put to death. Yet in the process of time, their infinite quarrels made them neglect Muhammad's law and revolt from the Caliph of Baghdad, for which they were severely punished by the Mohammedan caliphs, who caused all their books to be burnt. See, this is departing them from the scripture and moving them into the fake Islamic religion, on suspicion that the knowledge of the arts and sciences prompted them to condemn Muhammad's law. See, the Africans on the coast are still very gross idolaters. Marmot says that those of Barbary continued to worship the sun and fire till the year 349, when they were converted to Christianity. Some of the Negroes of Lower Ethiopia worshipped the sun, moon, and stars. Others worshipped water, fire, or the first living thing they met when they went abroad. Sorry about the typo. Those of Upper Ethiopia worshipped Yahuwah of heaven before the Queen of Sheba went to Solomon to be instructed in the law of Moses and the prophets, when they embraced Judaism, as did also some of the inhabitants of Lower Ethiopia, who continued in it till they were taught Christianity by the Queen of Candace's eunuch, who was baptized by Philip. So that is the witness from Atlas Geographicus. So what we see here is that when we look at the map of Africa, Upper Ethiopia is around the Congo and everything, and Lower Ethiopia is around what they call Ethiopia today. This is all sort of sub-Saharan Africa. So what we come to understand is that at the time when the Yehudi were ruling the southern kingdom, and even of course in the northern kingdom, when the northern kingdom was there, the inhabitants of the land of Africa were the true Yehudi, and they were worshiping Yahuwah Elohim. And everyone else in the regions, and then falling off, of course, with the northern kingdom, were practicing paganism. And this is where we come to understand that, of course, the Queen of Sheba was converted to the Elohim of creation and continued that faith. And so one of the things I also would like you to see is that, you know, the last reported true ruler of Ethiopia, autonomous, I don't know which dynasty he was. I go back and forth on it. Sometimes I think he was a true Tigray. Other times I think he was an Edomite, because currently it is still the Zagwe dynasty ruling in that area and causing a lot of unrest. But nonetheless, Tewodros was defeated by the British. They say he committed suicide, but you know, they say that about a lot of men who are hung on trees. So who wants to believe that? Not so sure. But you can see here, when we look at these people who took his son captive otherwise, what we see is that they are Huns. They're dressed in the garb of the Huns. Okay? These are the people, the wild men who were on the plains of Tartaria. And we see they look very much Caucasian. They are the Caucasus. They have blue eyes. They have beards. They have white skin. And this is their traditional clothing. And this is the British official who was the guardian to the son of Tewodros, who remained with the Queen and King in England until he passed away at a young age. So you see very clearly that these people are the Huns by the dress and clothing of the guardian of this young King Tewodros. and then they run right west all the way through to Europe, and you have what the European families ruling today, claiming to be Israel, claiming to be Jews, and all of the rest of it. So these are the four beasts, but the thing I want you to see, 1,260, really 260 years ago, is about when this happened. So it says it'll be for a time, times, and half a time, when you shall have accomplished to scatter the holy nation. So it's these groups who scatter Israel. All right. So these are the black popes. You can see this is Prester John, but he's got a cross, yet he's got a turban. And he calls himself Master, King of Kings, Lord of Lords. He's ruling the four corners of the earth, he's the third beast, the leopard with four heads. All right. Then comes the fourth beast. Like I said, this is the Canaanites, Gog and Magog. And I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, strong and exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. And I considered the horns, and behold, there came upon them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. And I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the wool of pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. So this is the Canaanites, who are the 7 nations, and the Khan ruling together. Tubal, Cain, Khan, Japheth. All right. And I've shown you in all my maps on, how North America is the land of 7 mountains, Septimus Severus. And so this is the Canaanites are currently ruling, and the Khan. All right. Have been conning us all, and they canonized scripture. All right. And they brought forth the fake Christ. And so Gog and Magog, Khan. The black popes handed power over to the Huns and the Khan, and these two run the world now. Japheth, Ham, and Esau of Shem. All right. And they've given power to the 4th kingdom. And one of the things Charlemagne did, and I want you to keep in mind that these Germans were called Black Palatine Boers, who then moved over to America, okay, in the 1700s. And Ferdinand, the popes and stuff, allowed Protestants and Muslims and Catholics to practice their faith. They also made treaties with the Huns, the albino Huns. So those are the white Huns, all right? Ottomans, Janissaries, all of those who had taken over the black Arab identities. So this was the big switch over to Japheth, which was enabled by Esau and his descendants. Okay, and so then we have this final beast that comes up out of the sea with the 10 horns. All right, and it says that power was given unto him 42 months. Okay, opened his mouth to blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given him over every kindred and tongue and nation. And so this is where you get Caesar Borgia and you get the fake Jesus. That's how the name is blasphemed, because that's not his name in any way, shape, or form. It's Zeus. It's Jesus Christ. It's not Yahushua HaMashiach. And so 42 months is 1,260 days is a time, times, and half a time. So that's where we are. Like I said, it's been about 1,260 years since all of these guys were positioned. And then these guys took over. The Khans, the bad seed of Shem, Ham, and Japheth took over. All right, in the form of the Mongol Khans. All right. So just keep that in mind. We're in the 1,260 years scattering. And through that, you become Babylonian. You become the fourth man, the golden horde, the Mongol, which so many of us are mixed now because of Babylon. But Satan meant it for evil, and Yah meant it for good. Right. So we're going to read through Daniel 11. So here is Daniel 11, and we have this whole prophecy from the time of Darius the Mede. And it goes through all these Gentile nations until the end. Okay. And it talks about Alexander the Great coming, and then his kingdom being split into four, shall be divided towards the four winds of heaven, not to his posterity, right? And then it talks about this king of the south rising up. And it talks about the king's daughter coming to make an agreement, but she will not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand his arm, but she shall be given up. Cleopatra, if you're talking about the queen of the south, because then that can be either the Shemites, or sometimes it's Ham. You're talking about the queen of the south. It can be the Cushites, or it can be the Shemitic Ethiopians, or the Cushitic Ethiopians, okay? And so the captives, Israel goes captive to Egypt. So this is principally highlighting the rulership of the kings of the north. So these are the Japhetic kings coming in, because they have the Genesis prophecy that Japheth will dwell in the tents of Shem, and also obviously the prophecy and promise of Esau ruling by the sword, via the fourth man, via this confederacy. And we get into this prophecy where I believe we're talking about Edom at the time that he is ruling. He has taken over the rulership of Africa. Start at verse 14, Daniel 11 and 14. And in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south. Also the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fail. I believe that this is the time when Prester John comes along. And remember, I talk about how the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser is actually Esau, Edom. All right, and so we had the Holy Roman Empire, we had Mansa Musa ruling throughout the whole earth and calling himself David and Solomon as Prester John. So exalting himself to fulfill the vision of being the Messiah. And you can imagine, once he got the advantage, he and his people probably believed that the promise of having the ruling kingdom like Israel had it would be theirs now. You could totally see that happening. That's why they had their Presters, their Holy Roman Empire. That's why they had called him Solomon, and called their kings Davids and Solomons. Okay? This is what you read about in Prester John. But this is a double prophecy. So let's read it through again from the beginning. Daniel 11 and 14. And in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south. Also the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fail. So then the king of the north shall come and cast upon a mount and take the most fenced cities, and the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. But he that cometh against him shall do according to his will, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land by which his hand shall be consumed. So this is the king of the north. So this is when Japheth comes into the land of Shem to rule it. Okay, this is after the Medo-Persian Empire. Emily, you let me know if these aren't the Gomerians who mixed in amongst the Ethiopians and had their own rule. Just listen to this.
For those of you that are always shouting, respect people's food cultures. If you went to an Ethiopian wedding and they served you raw meat with some blended pepper, would you eat it? Because this is the way they eat in Ethiopia, apparently. Not all of them, but most of them. They eat raw meat because there was one time there was war and they couldn't cook the meat, because if they cook the meat, the smokes will come out and blah, blah, blah. So they ate the meat raw. That's what I heard. Would you eat raw meat in an Ethiopian wedding if you were served? Yes or no?
Back again with Netanyahu. Let's just finally prove, as the king of the Khan, not necessarily the king of the Jews, how he will be overcome in the present scenario to arise. And remember, I said they're trying to get into Africa. So it may not stop at so-called, what they call so-called, Israel today, Jerusalem today, because true Jerusalem is in Africa. They are in Israel. They're in the northern kingdom. They're not in the southern kingdom, Jerusalem, though. Although among the Ethiopians are their own hordes. They're even mixed in amongst the Ethiopians. So, but let's continue with this. I don't want to get off topic. They have to get into the land, and so let's just clarify and finally seal the truth and the fact of the prophecy that I believe at this point, and this is not a word from God, but I believe that Netanyahu is the king of the West. Let's finalize it. Let's put a button.
Designation of the Babylonian king is not indicated directly by naming him. You have to deduce from reading this who he is by directional bearings. Okay, am I making sense? So 4 winds. There's a north, south, east, and west wind. And we deduct by who is not cited, the direction that is not cited, who this king of Babylon. If we look at this prophecy, looking at Africa being the place where the Most High resides in Mount Zion, when we read this prophecy, this is how we can begin to read it. What it starts off with is in Daniel 11:40, it says, "And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass over." So that is the king of the north. That would be Russia. Okay, so Russia is prodding this wicked Babylonian king, and that king comes into the lands and starts to pass over them. So that may be the door to Africa, the place where this all is pushed at and pushed open. The 2-leaf gates. Now, of course, it is the people themselves who are the doors and the gates. But I just want you to consider that and consider perhaps maybe that there is an Eden, Mount Zion at the center of the earth. So this is a picture of this rogue king pushing at Russia, all right, provoking Russia. Now, of course, Russia is clearing the Ukrainians out of the land of Shem. So they're not out of order in that respect, based on the designations of the land. At that time shall the king of the south now push at this rogue king. Okay, so that's like Ethiopia, Egypt, South Africa. Looks like it might be shaping up that way. So he shall push at him, king of the south. And the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass over. So he's going to go into many lands, but I'm thinking he's going to go into the land that everyone's contending over right now, Africa. And so I don't think this is the full-on Antichrist. I think this is the king of Babylon, possibly, because it says he'll come to his, what happens in the end, right? It's not the coming of Yahusha. It's something else that is happening to cause him to come to an end. That's why I think this He, they're talking about, is the king of Babylon, a kind of Antichrist. And he shall enter also into a glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab, the descendants of Lot and Jordan, and the chief of the children of Ammon. He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. And the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. So this king already has power over the whole earth. And in this war, he'll have the power of Egypt and the Ethiopians on his side. Okay, he'll have the Ethiopians and Egypt on his side. That's why I say there's also South Africa, and there's other nations that could come against him from the south. So, as I've said before, I did this teaching before, and I got it from one of my teachers, Prince Israel, based on the land that is called Israel right now. But like I said, I'm reapplying this prophecy here in this context. So at the next stage here, it says, but tidings out of the east, that is India, Iran, and China, and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with a great fury to destroy and utterly make away many. Okay, so it seems like he's just on a rampage now because he's actually at war with all of these carpenters. And this part is really curious. So it says, and he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. So this is a really curious scripture. So obviously, this is the story of his defeat. So he's going to be left in a place where he has no help, and he's going to realize that kingdom is over. But where does he plant his tabernacle? Where has he planted his tabernacle? We look at these directional indicators of north, south, east, and west. We see that the king of the north is coming from the north, that there is an African king coming from the south, and it doesn't seem like it's Ethiopia or Egypt. And then from the so-called east, well, it'd have to be the east if it's India coming and China, all right, are coming from the east. So the one direction we are missing is in this whirlwind, because it takes 4 winds to create a whirlwind. What is the final direction we are missing? So you answered correctly. Yes, it is the west. The west is not mentioned. So he is the king of the west. He is the king of Babylon. He is the king of Egypt. And that is Amorite. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you understand that, yes, indeed, Netanyahu is the Ashkenazi Canaanite king of the West. And I am working on my book. I'm going to probably read directly from it to give you more insight through. So, fam, it's very important to understand that it is Sheba and Dedan, the Midianites, not all the Ethiopians, but the real Ethiopian Midianites, as well as the Medo-Persians, as well as, I mentioned before, Nebaioth, and the ships of Tarshish, who are on the side of Israel and dwelling amongst them and having economic relationships with Israel when Israel dwells safely in a city without walls and no longer goes in and out. And this is in chapter
38 of the book of Ezekiel. And it says, the word of Yahuwah came to me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog and the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal, and prophesy against him. Thus saith Yahuwah Elohim, behold, I am against thee, O Gog, chief prince of Meshach and Tubal, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth, and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company, with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. So we can see these are seafaring people, and they have all kinds of armor, sounding like the Vikings and the Scythians, right? And then it says, Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Notice how it says Persia. Interesting, right? Gomer and all his bands, the house of Togarmah of the north quarters and all his bands, and many people with thee. Be thou prepared and prepare thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. After many days thou shalt be visited. In the latter years thou shalt come into the land that is brought back from the sword and is gathered out of many people against the mountains of Israel, which have been always waste, but is brought forth out of the nations, and they shall dwell safely, all of them. So these are people dwelling in safety. They are not a people who've been warring with every nation around them for the last 70 years, and then out of the blue attacks nations. They're dwelling in safety. And thou shalt ascend and come like a storm, and thou shalt be like a cloud to cover the land, thou and all thy bands, and many people with thee. Thus saith Yahuwah Elohim, it shall come to pass that at that time shall things come into thy mind, and thou shalt think an evil thought, and thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages. I will go to them that are at rest and dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls, having neither bars nor gates. Okay? To take a spoil, to take a prey, to turn thine hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited, upon the people that are gathered out of the nations, which have gotten cattle and goods, that dwell in the midst of the land. See, Israel's going to get all kinds of cattle and goods and everything. Sheba and Dedan, and the merchants of Tarshish. This is why we wanted to know who Tarshish was. With all the young lions thereof, shall say unto thee, art thou come to take a spoil? Hast thou gathered thy company to take a prey, to carry away silver and gold, to take away cattle and goods, to take a great spoil? Therefore, Son of man, prophesy unto Gog, thus saith Yahuwah Elohim, in that day when my people of Israel dwelleth safely, shalt thou not know it. And thou shalt come from thy place out of the north parts, thou and many people with thee, all of them riding on horses, a great company and a mighty army. And thou shalt come up against my people of Israel as a cloud to cover the land, and it shall be in the latter days, and I will bring thee against my land, that the heathen may know me. Then shall I be sanctified in thee, O Gog, before thine eyes. All right? So what we see here is it's Sheba, Dedan, and the merchants of Tarshish. That's why I wanted to know who Tarshish was. Because if you'll notice, it says the Persians are coming against them. So is this Medi or the Persians, right? Because they're two different people. That's why when we look at the original image of the ram that Alexander the Great comes against, it has one small horn and one bigger horn. The bigger horn is Medi, the smaller horn is the Persians. So what is going to happen with that kingdom of Medo-Persia or the Persians? How are they going to be split after Israel returns to the land? So that's why I'm really wanting you to be cautious and know about who is who, and know at this time that when these things happen, as it says in Zechariah Zechariah 1 and 20 showed me the 4 carpenters, and I said, what come these to do? And he spake, saying, this is the angel of Yahuwah, these are the horns which have scattered Judah, so that no man did lift up his head, but these are come to fray them, to cast out the horns of the Gentiles, with which lifted up their horn over the land of Judah, to scatter it. So this is the prophecy of the 4 carpenters. And it says, cry yet, saying, thus saith Yahuwah of hosts, my cities through prosperity shall yet be spread apart, and Yahuwah shall yet comfort Zion, and shall choose Jerusalem. Then I lifted up my eyes, and behold, 4 horns. This is where the 4 carpenters come from. And this is where it says in chapter 2, it says, I lifted up my eyes, and behold, a man with a measuring line in his hand. And I said, whither goest thou? And he said to me, to measure Jerusalem, to see what is the breadth thereof, and what is the length thereof. And behold, the angel that talked with me went forth, and another angel went out to meet him, and said unto him, run, speak to this young man, saying, Jerusalem shall be inhabited as towns without walls, for the multitude of men and cattle therein. For I, saith the Lord, will be unto her a wall of fire round about, and I will be glory in the midst of her. Ho, ho, come forth, flee from the land of the north, saith Yahuwah, for I have spread you abroad as the 4 winds of the heaven, saith Yahuwah. Deliver thyself, O Zion, that dwellest with the daughter of Babylon. For thus saith Yahuwah of hosts, after the glory he hath sent me unto the nations which spoiled you, for he that toucheth you toucheth the apple of my eye. And I will shake my hand upon them, and they shall be a spoil to their servants, and ye shall know that Yahuwah of hosts has sent me. So here's a clue. It says that Israel will take captive those whose captors they were, and the Gentiles will serve Israel. They'll be doing it willingly and in righteousness, because servanthood in Israel is different from servanthood in Babylon. It's not slavery. But this is, you're going to recognize that this has happened because people will dwell in a town without walls. Servants will be willing and happy to serve, and it'll be like having a job. And Yahuwah will dwell in the midst, his spirit and his light, until he physically comes in the form of Yahusha. And it says, for behold, I will shake my hand upon them, and they shall be a spoil to their servants, and ye shall know that Yahuwah of hosts have sent me. So you're going to recognize that this is the second Exodus, because Israel will come out with cattle and people as servants, and then return to the land to dwell there peacefully. Neither of those 2 things happened. As well, it's the 4 winds of heaven. That means coming from the 4 corners of the earth after captivity, slavery, and persecution. And that never happened. So, but I do want you to notice, remember that Cyrus is called the servant of Yahuwah, but we do see the Persians on the side of Gog and Magog in the final war before the 1,000-year reign. So please keep that in mind. And this is why I say, be circumspect with the fulfilling of this prophecy right now. And remember my dream about the balloons. For whatever it's worth, we'll see what it turns out to mean. Yah seems to give me those dreams, and he doesn't give me the interpretation a lot of times. So I think it's good, because then I'd be trying to control everything. Once again, Daniel 11 and 14 says, also the spoilers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, and they shall fail, says the Septuagint. So it is Edom who spoiled. Remember, no matter what your seed is, you can accept the seed of Yahushua HaMashiach and choose to leave your father's house. So thank you for your prayers and donations, family. They mean so much to me, and thank you for showing up and participating. And so This series could go on forever. I think next week I'm going to talk about the priest kings of Israel and just contrast that with the whole Prester John idea, which is how we came to a false Christ. But otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed this series. And of course, I have a ton of Prester John videos, so maybe I'll create a playlist. Go ahead and peruse my playlist. And it is no coincidence that Trump is saying to everyone whom he is evicting, this is not your father's house. So he's sending people home. But Yahushua HaMashiach and Yahuwah Elohim have a house of prayer for all nations. Shalom. Be sure to go to intoalltruth.net to pick up the Moedim Appointed Times calendar, as well as Chaya, Eat, Life, and Fast, the Hebraic Lifestyle and Cookbook. It's also a health book to help you with your natural health the Hebraic way, according to the ways taught to Noah.
Arise of you, O Yahweh. Let your enemies be scattered, and let those that hate thee flee from before thee. Give him thanks by saying hallelujah.